Hi guys, and welcome to week 6. So in week 5 we did the pretty much the bulk of the work, I would say, for the drone decloaking effect. So we have the drone revealing itself and this hexagon type geometry on top as part of the transition. And if we just jump in and look at what we worked on last week, it's actually not very complicated at all. Pretty simple, and there's not much going on here. And I think it's quite a nice clean setup, and it's all basically based on this propagation solver and then just some interesting geometry manipulation going on down here. And that's basically it. So I think the bulk of that is done, and I think it's looking pretty good in the comp. So for this week 6, we'll just be adding 1 or 2 extra layers of detail to the way this drone is appearing in the scene. So for starters, I think what we'll do is work on that projection style effect I was talking about. So at the moment in the comp, we're seeing the inside of this mesh here. So if we, well, let me just remove the dark ones. So let's say cd.z less than 1. Okay, so there's a range here above 1 on the blue, which is fine. So basically, if I just keep the bright bits, you can see what's happening as an exaggeration of what's happening in the comp. We're actually seeing the inside of the drone as it's appearing in the scene. So my idea was to take somewhere like basically the source of our propagation, which is this central core here, and project lines. So what would appear maybe like a scanning style effect or a hologram is have these lines, just bright emissive lines, connecting from the core to all the newly generated hexagons. So we get some bright flashing lines and streaks connecting the core of that drone to all these brand new hexagons here. So if I compare that to the non-deleted one, we have a lot of different values of blue throughout the range here of this mask. But if I just delete and keep the very leading edge, then we can just have the lines affecting the leading edge and not have lines everywhere inside. So let's start by having that selection there. And I'm also going to object merge in our drone. So I'll come up here to effects decloak and take our render drone. So that's our drone there, and like I said, I just want to basically have something that our streaks or projection lines can come from, which in my mind, everything that's triggering this effect is this core over here. So let's isolate that. And crash. And we're back. Another random crash for no obvious reason. So I'm just back to exactly where it was when it crashed, luckily. So let's try this again. So I'm just selecting a face there and hitting Shift G to expand that selection to all connected faces. And that's given me pretty much everything I need. Let's try that again. So there we go. Just do that, hit non-selected, and I've got my core. So I think that's what I want, and I can use that now to basically make sure anything I add to the center is always pointing to that core. So let's have a look. We've got this piece of geometry here. Let's do a line and a copy. So orient the line in Z. Let's copy stamp. Okay, so first things first, let me just scale down on the copy here to a negative value, because you can see, because they align to the normals, they're pointing outward, and I don't want anything flying out, so we'll just have that pointing slightly in. And then I'm also going to put down a group and set this to 1 points. So here's point 0 of the line, and the second point of the line is the end, and that's point number 1. So I've just put that into a group. Oh, that's the name. End should be the name, and 1 in the base group. So now we have a bunch of lines, and we have a group that tells us which is the endpoint of each one of these. So that's cool. And now I also want to take the attributes we have on those hexagons and apply them to the points, so they get that blue. And then what we do is we can just ray these lines to this core based on minimum distance, and we just set the group to end. So very quickly, we've just got lines that are always going to be connected to that core, and the other end of the line is always going to be connected to the brightest of blues of our hexagon mesh. So something like that. So that's not going to be very exciting by itself, so let's just break this up a little bit. So I'm going to take this mesh and just put a noise on the color. Let's grab a turbulent. Alligator's probably fine. We'll take color, multiply it by this noise. Okay. Let me just switch off tint back faces there. So the idea here is just to change the color enough on these hexagons to add some visual interest to our lines. So if I just have it flat shaded, there's nothing much going on there, and I want variance in the sort of intensity and the transparency of these lines as well. Maybe the thickness. So I'll try a few things and make this really contrasty. So let's boost up our color here with a power. Make it a bit more extreme. It's maybe too much. But we get that contrast in the color here with this exponent. We can just multiply that down. And then we have this noise here. So I put that attenuation up just to make it a little bit less frequent. It's not the frequency, but the noise has basically more extreme contrast between dark areas and bright areas. So there's a bigger space of difference. This flattens out the noise, and if I go up, it's basically a power for the noise. Okay, so something like that. And we can use that color at the end to change how many lines we see. Because basically, if I just look at this bit and I up the attenuation, then we only get a few lines visible and the rest will make transparent. So we have some control over here about how many of these projection lines we actually see in the finished product. I'm also going to put down a wrangle over here and just set some attributes. So let's do an alpha based on blue again. And maybe set a width. I'm not sure what our width should be, so let's just start really small. And this can be our lines. So a very simple and quick setup there. So we'll see how that works. I also want to keep this because I plan on adding the electrical style effect. So let's make sure we always know where these effects are coming from. I have that core. But this is essentially still in our hex geometry here, so we'll object merge all of this stuff out. So let me actually just do a quick flipbook of this before we wrap up this line effect here. Just trying to figure out what I'm looking at here. I think because I have attributes. No. Okay, new plan. I'm going to object merge this out right now. So we'll call this effects decloak lines. So there's our lines there. And the alpha's working, but I think there's just, it's having problems visualizing that over here. I am just going to visualize this for now. So a quick flipbook of this just to make sure it looks interesting in some way or another. And then it's basically just needs a standard emissive shader, which we've done a few times now. And obviously here you have to kind of imagine that these darker lines aren't really going to be visible. They're very visible here in the flipbook, but I mean we basically just want to see these bright blue ones. So that gives us a pretty good idea of what we're aiming for here. I think it should add quite a lot. I don't think we even really need to add a light for that, but we just need something going on internally inside that drone. And it's a cool kind of transformer style thing where it feels like the drone is constructing itself out of hexagons, and that core piece inside is kind of drawing the hexagons as they appear. So that should add a nice little flash of detail while we're watching the drone unfold in the comp. So let's do a quick shader for that. It doesn't really matter in which context you build these shaders. I think probably in the next version of Houdini it will make a difference, because I believe ShopNet is being deprecated basically. So to form a good habit, probably work in MatNet for now. I'm slightly old school. So a principled shader, what do we need? Our color, our alpha, and we'll multiply our color by our alpha. And this can be our emission color. And our alpha will go into opacity. On the shader itself, we don't need to change anything except switch reflectivity off. We don't need that. And for now, switch emission eliminates objects off. So there we go. So let me set up a quick mantra just to check that that works, and to check our width attribute as well. So we don't want to see anything except for the lines themselves, and we do want to mat out the hex. So I'm just thinking about that. Is it the hex? So we have these lines, and we need them to appear like they're only inside. Let's go with the hex for now. These should be super quick to render as well, so if it doesn't work in the comp for whatever reason, we can quickly tweak that and re-output the render. So for now we have the lines rendering, and we have the hex deform as a matte object. So let's see how that looks. Okay, I think that width attribute was pretty much spot on. So that looks pretty cool, I would say. You can see the lines inside. I think the one problem is going to be what we use to actually mask it out. So here obviously the dark parts of the hexagons, which shouldn't even be visible, are actually still masking it out. And if I take that out completely, that's what we get. So still, I think this proves that these are working pretty good. We need to probably go quite high on the pixel samples just because it's such a thin, fine effect here. You can see we can get a slightly smoother result there. And then possibly even make a matte object based off of this. Or, yeah, the alpha should be working on here. Let's try that again because I had the render flag on the wrong object. Because the matte should be taking the alpha into consideration from the shader. No. Is it? Yeah, it is. It's quite difficult to tell. Yeah, I can definitely see more of these lines now. So I think I'll go for that for now. You can see over here. So that should hopefully give us what we need for the comp. So that's our first little extra effect done. I'll end this video here and we'll try and tackle the electrical style effect in the next video. So I'll see you then.